Alright guys, this is Amarbir from Chandigarh Data Recovery, and today we will discuss the different modules we will be covering in the online data recovery training course. Let me give you a broad perspective of all the major modules that we will cover, and then we will talk about the sub parts of that particular module. First of all, in the course we will be covering the electronics module. After the electronics module, we will go for logical data recovery. After logical data recovery, we will cover semi-physical data recovery. After the semi-physical data recovery, we will cover the physical data recovery. So these are going to be the four main modules which we are going to cover in this course. Alright, now in the earlier clip we had discussed the four main modules that we are going to cover in this course. Now let's discuss about each module in little bit more details to make you aware what you're going to cover in this particular course. So let's talk about electronics first. First we will cover general electronics. What do I mean by general electronics? That what is electricity, AC, DC, and some other things about related to electricity like voltage, ampere, what is the difference, stuff like this. The second sub-module inside the electronic module will be passive electronic components. Now in passive electronic components we will cover three main electronic parts: the resistance, the resistors, the capacitors, and the inductors. So the passive electronic component submodule will cover these three main devices. Then the next one is going to be the active electronic components. In the active electronic components, we will cover semiconductors like diodes, transistor, MOSFET, and some derivatives of these like TVS diode, Zener diode, and some other small different variations in these three main devices. Then the next one which we will cover is digital electronics. In the digital electronics, we will talk about what is digital electronics, some very basic gates, and then we will be talking about how a microcontroller in general works, so that you have an idea that because the next module, the next main sub-module, the last sub-module of electronics basically covers the entire hard drives working as far as physically how it is working, electronically how it works, what are the power protection stages and stuff like that. So I'll just write it down. So we have a special chapter on hard drives. In this we will discuss about different type of connectors, their pinouts of the hard drive, the power input stage, what are the protections that are used over there, for example TVS diodes, 0 ohm resistance, and then how to swap the ROM, all those details. The module will also cover a few videos so that certain things where I think that you practically need to see them, you should be able to see them. Once this last chapter is complete, unless this chapter is not complete, the semi-physical work, and you will not be able to do some of the parts, which involves when you have those hard drives with defective PCBs. Okay, so after the electronics main module, we will be covering the logical data recovery module. Now, many of you guys will say, sir, what do you mean by logical data recovery? Logical data recovery means that the media, that might be a hard drive, that might be a pen drive, it might be a flash card, it might be a mobile phone, it might be a tablet, it might be a voice recorder, etc., etc. So in a logical data recovery case, the media is fine, but still you are not able to see the data. For example, a virus has attacked the media, or you have formatted the media, or there has been a file system corruption in the media, etc., etc. So now let's see how we are going to plan that particular course module. So we'll say logical data recovery, not semi-physical, 1 minute. So this is like, so in logical data recovery, I will first explain what do we mean by logical data recovery. What is logical data recovery? What is logical data recovery? Then we will cover file systems, and in this we will talk in general about the file systems which are there in a Windows based machine like FAT and NTFS. And then we will talk about Linux file system ext, ext4. Then we will talk about Mac file system, which is the HFS, HFS Plus, and the latest APFS. So we will discuss about file systems. After we discuss about file systems and understand file systems, then we will talk and we will learn how the hard drive actually boots, how we read the master boot record, the first sector in the hard drive, and then from where does it jump, what does it do, so that finally you see your operating system up and running on your machine. So how it initializes, how your media initializes. How does the media initialize? So after we do this particular small subcomponent of this course module, then we will go to the next part, which is what kind of logical corruption cases you will get. So we will talk about practical examples. So like this you will come to know that in what situation, what kind of tool you have to use and how you have to solve that problem. After the practical examples, you might be thinking that this module will get over. No, it will not get over. We will talk about some other logical data recovery corruption examples. I will say other LDR, logical data recovery problems, other logical data recovery problems which are necessarily not related to these first things that I have shown you. I'll give you an example. Like for example, if the file is password protected and password is forgotten, such kind of things. And in the last, we will talk about RAID. Here we will focus on RAID 0, RAID 1 and RAID 5. And I'll tell you what this RAID does, how you have to solve a case without too much of having RAID knowledge. RAID is a very big topic. RAID can have a totally different course. But generally I would say that 80% plus cases that you will get into your office or your business premises, you will be able to solve the RAID case using this small techniques and some softwares that I'll discuss about. So this will cover the complete logical data recovery main module. So after the main module of logical data recovery, we will migrate to semi-physical data recovery. Now in semi-physical data recovery, we will basically do the firmware part of the data recovery, which is how to handle different issues with different brand hard drives, what are the common failures of firmware that can happen into that family, how to overcome it, how to solve a problem where we have bad sectors or the surface is bad or one particular head in a multi-head hard drive is bad. So many of the students will be wondering what firmware is. I'll give you a very basic and simple example to understand firmware. Let's assume that you sit on front of your computer and you switch it on. What happens? Until unless the operating system does not start, you are not able to work on that PC. So similarly, when you give power to the hard drive, there is some code which is written by the hard drive manufacturer, which is stored, partial of it is stored in the hard drive's printed circuit main motherboard, and then some of it is stored in the platters. Once this entire code is executed, only and only then the hard drive will start behaving like a hard drive. So once that code, which is written by the manufacturer, it is actually executed by the hard drive itself and stored into the RAM of the hard drive becomes ready for your computer. Only then it can communicate information between itself and the motherboard and your operating system. So this is the firmware, and there are many problems that can happen with firmware. So how will we solve these issues? Now what we will do, let's talk about the different sub-modules we'll be covering in this semi-physical data recovery main module. So in semi-physical data recovery main module, the first module we will cover is going to be based on the Western Digital hard drives, because Western Digital hard drives are very different to work with than the other hard drives, but the firmware is so complete that it gives a very broad knowledge about how the hard drive firmware works, what are the common problems. So the first module we will cover is Western Digital. Western Digital hard drives. Second module which we will cover is going to be, I don't want to cover Seagate typically like other people will cover in the second phase. I will like to cover the Seagate in the end, because I think that the Seagate firmware working and topology is very different than the other hard drives, and it can create a problem in your understanding. You can start thinking, oh yeah, this is too complex, so what to do? So that is not the right approach as a teacher, I think. So the second module which I will be doing is the Hitachi hard drives, and there are two Hitachi hard drive families. One is the old architecture and one is the new ARM architecture. So we will be covering both over there. In Western Digital we will be covering not the old one. Old architecture is like the caviar architecture, 16-bit, 32-bit, but we will be covering the Marvel. The Marvel architecture we will be covering. Then after this we have the Toshiba. Toshiba we will be covering. There are not too many old and new generations in this. So we will be covering the Toshiba hard drive family as far as firmware is concerned. Then we will be covering the Samsung hard drives. In the end we will be covering the Seagate. And in the Seagate we have the old classic family which we will be doing, and the latest F3 family which we will be covering. The latest hard drives which come now are all based on the F3 family architecture. There are certain other hard drives also which are not very common, and teaching them in this particular module is not advisable. One is Fujitsu, and the second one is Maxter, and the third one is the Quantum. Although these three drives are definitely supported by PC3000, my main tool for training will be PC3000, one of the world's best tool. And occasionally, if I think that there is an alternative tool which does that job in a little better way or an easier way, I will take that particular tool into the module explanation. But most of my focus will be on PC3000 because this is what you are paying me for. So we will have some intense focus on this. And like I did in the electronic main module, that the last module that I covered was specific to hard drives. In this also we will have a last topic dedicated to that, in which we will practically talk about the problems that can happen with the boards and how to work around them. So we'll have that practical electronic failures that will happen in these drives, and using the teaching I did in the electronics module, the last module, and what you have learned here, you will be able to easily solve this. This completely covers the semi-physical data recovery main module. So alright, the last main module in the course is going to be the physical module. And what do I mean by physical module? I'm not talking about some physical failures of the printed circuit, motherboard, logic board, whatever you call it, because I consider that to be a semi-physical kind of an issue, because until unless the hard drive is not opened in a proper environment and inspected and some internal work is not done, I don't consider that to be a physical case as far as mechanical hard drives are concerned. Now let's see what are the different sub-components of the physical data recovery course. The first thing that I would like to explain to everybody, all my students, would be what is physical data recovery. What is physical data recovery? This is going to be the first subcomponent, the sub-part of this course. Second, I would like to explain everybody what kind of an environment you have to create so that you can take a case into a clean room and work. There are a lot of misconceptions and weird ideas that people have about hard drives. You know, you can open it here, you can open it there. So I will be explaining you what kind of environment is required to open up the hard drive. The environment required, here we will talk about excuse me, we'll talk about the clean room in general and where we have to place the clean room, how much dimension it should be, what is the kind of cleanliness you require. There is a lot of difference between the cleanliness standards required by the Americans, Europeans and the Indians. Me being in India, it's a very extremely dusty country. We have this fine dust particles which keep roaming around in the air and we have to take some extra steps. So I will explain you those extra steps along with explaining you what kind of environment you need to open up this hard drive. After we do this, we will talk about opening and closing the hard drive. Opening and closing a hard drive. The next sub part of this main module would be how to do a head swap. How to do a head swap. And there are many different varieties of hard drives. So I will prepare some videos in which we are doing job work on different hard drives, and every different hard drive will have its own method of changing the heads. Some of the hard drives are ramp based models. The head is parked outside the platter on a plastic parking area called the ramp, and in some of the hard drives the head actually goes inside the platter and near the main rotating motor where it parks itself. Not only we will talk about these two variations and show you how we do a head swap on that, I will also explain you how to how different drive families, they have some peculiar things that you have to note while you are doing this, otherwise your head swap is going to go to hell. Now after this we are going to talk about the platter swap. If you have a problem with your hard drive motor and you need to migrate the entire platters into a totally different HDA head and disk assembly main black mount with a working motor, so in that case how to do a platter swap. And then we will talk about some practical problems that we can come across here. What kind of practical problems we can encounter in doing physical data recovery. So this completes the entire physical data recovery sub-components that we will be covering in the course. Okay, so I have explained to you what are the main, topics I'm going to cover in this data recovery complete A to Z course, and what are these small sub parts of each main module. Along with teaching you this, I will love to hear some emails that you will be sending me. I will reply to them, and I can also take some remote sessions of some of the practical cases you have. Might be we can record those sessions and add them into the videos in the course, so that many other people can also understand what are the typical problems a newbie can have, how we people solve it, and how do we get to the end result, which is delivering the customer his data and taking the money from him and putting it into your pocket, which is the main intention of doing this course, is making money while being into the data recovery business. So on that note, I am going to close this particular small explanation about the course that I wanted to share with my students, so that they have at least an idea and they are prepared that what topic I'm going to cover and what is going to be the next topic that I'm going to cover. So see you guys, and now we will practically talk. We'll start with the electronics module first, and we'll talk about each sub part of that course till we complete that main module, and then keep on shifting to the next and the next and the next module. Cheers guys.